Now today's shop project, we're going to do an oil and filter change on our GS1100E. It's a 1982. It's got roughly 80,000 miles on it. It is ready for its oil and filter, which we do every 4,000 miles. Sometimes we do it at 3,000 if we've had a really hot summer or a really cold winter. It's a relatively simple job. Maybe there's some tips on here that'll help you do yours. Now, step one is to let the engine come up to operating temperature. You can pretty much tell on this bike if you put your hand on the valve covers and they're hot, that's good enough. It doesn't have to be any hotter than that. And there's a couple of reasons I would not want to let it sit out there in the driveway and just, you may run the risk on a hot day it might overheat. Anyway, you can tell, just put your hand on the engine, and if you feel the heat, that'll let the oil be thin enough that it'll drain out and you'll get most of it out very conveniently. Next step, get a brand new filter. Now, Suzuki always is, I'm skeptical about how they say put the filter in every other oil change. I like to put a new filter in every time. And this bike has just under 80,000 miles now, so I don't want to run the risk that for some reason I've skimped on filters or on oil, and I've won the battle but lost the war. Anyway, these little lights from Harbor Freight are handy. I replaced the gasket, the oil pan gasket on this, after I think it was 40 years. It's 42 years, actually 43 years now. So just having that done, and I don't have to deal with that. The drain plug, 21 millimeters. And I know people that have told me they've stripped the drain plug. It's soft aluminum. Oh, I guess there's a torque setting on there. I do it by hand, but I'm sure there's a torque setting Suzuki recommends. Getting the filter out. Now, this is one of the tricky things of this bike. Because the engine is hot, the pipes are the hottest part of the engine. So if you like to work without gloves, there's a good chance you might get burned. Pulling the oil filter, there's 5 bolts. I have a real handy long extension that I use. I got from Harbor Freight. Real easy. Get in there now. And usually what will happen is some of or all of the nuts will drop into the oil, or the cover will drop in, because I don't want to get my hands and burn the pipe. Second thing, I don't want to have, if I'm working with rubber gloves, sometime when you get your hands in there by the pipes, it'll put a stain on the chrome, or in this case, this is an 86 exhaust system, and it has black chrome. I don't want to stain the chrome, and I don't want to have to polish it off. So this is one part of the job that just takes a little patience. Eventually you get it off, and the filter comes right out. And of course, if you're lucky, you've gotten to this point in the job without burning your hand. Now, I've heard so many people say, and people I really trust their opinion, lifetime mechanics, say there's no single thing you can do to keep a motorcycle running well or keep it running at all than just doing regular oil and filter changes. Number one, maintenance. So once I have the cover off, I don't want to drop the spring into the oil pan and forget to put it back. That's one thing, I guess, if you weren't familiar with this, you could do. The K&N filters always give you an extra gasket. I don't know why. A good trick, if you have trouble getting a new gasket to seat in there, clean it out immaculately with paper towels or carburetor cleaner or whatever. I like to keep this immaculate. And put a little wheel bearing grease all along the edge in that groove, and then little by little pat the new gasket down in there. That just makes the job a little bit easier, a little bit quicker. And again, the K&N filter or Suzuki filter, whichever one you use, a new filter to me is the cheapest insurance you can get for a motorcycle. It's just the saddest thing of all when you have to do any work on the engine and you could have just changed the oil and postponed that maintenance. Now, back in the good old days, everybody wanted to use these engines to make drag bikes with. And it's very difficult to buy a spare engine if you, for some reason, shortchange the maintenance on anything and you need to replace it. It's really difficult to find a decent engine. Now, at this point, you can make the job a lot easier than if you skip over this step. I always go and have a nice cup of coffee and take a break and let everything cool down. I've done this so many times that when I go and I try to rush it through, I always wind up making myself more work than I need to have. Once the engine is cool, you can get the nuts and bolts hands started a lot easier. You got to be sure that you still got the spring on the cover, that hasn't somehow dropped down. A little bit tricky, but once you have it and you've got the first bolt on and you can just hand tighten it, the other four go on relatively easy, and you've made yourself a lot less work just by taking a little bit of a coffee break right here. Now, I know a lot of people that don't understand this. This is the technology of the day or whatever, but when I used to own an airplane, we used to send the oil out after an oil change to look for little metal particles in the oil. Now, I always do this old school, and I don't show this on here because it's something most people wouldn't do. But if it's a bright sunny day, you can take that out in the sun, and if you see little specks of like little sparkly things in the oil, you might have a problem with the engine. If that oil looks, and it's always going to be dark, of course, after 4,000 miles, 3,000 even, what's going to happen is, when you have the oil clean and there's no sparkles at all in it, especially on a high mileage bike like this, at least you have some confidence that, well, your maintenance is going in the right direction. Now, I have a lot of friends that have GSs with a lot of mileage. Tim's has the most, I think. He's got 88,000. Some people I've heard have over 100,000, and these engines seem to last forever. They last forever when you do the maintenance, and specifically the oil and filter. Now, when you take the drain plug out, you'll notice that there's a little magnet in the middle of the drain plug. A lot of people will just take a rag or a paper towel and wipe it off. I like to get it immaculately clean. I like to take a carburetor cleaner and spray it there and dry it real well, and that is any little thing you can keep from getting into the oil filter or into the oil or into the engine, actually. The cleaner that oil is and the fresher it is and the better that it's being filtered, it all contributes to the long life of the engine. And when you find somebody that doesn't get long life in the engine, you almost always find out they somehow skimped on the maintenance. Now, next step is to put the drain plug in, but the first thing is I stand the bike up straight. See, it's on an angle here. And what happens, there'll always be just maybe a shot glass more of oil that'll come out, and I'll hold it straight up and down. Again, the idea is to get all this old oil out, make room for the new oil. Because it seems like every time I do an oil change, there's always some oil under the bike. I put this rubber mat upside down, and you can see there's always something dripping and drooling and stuff. It just protects my very expensive rug that I got from Luciano. This is a I think it came right from a casino in Rome, this rug. And but hey, having a rug, it seems like that would be funny. Yeah, no, it's not. In fact, my whole garage is carpeted, at least one layer, and where I do the work, 2 and 3 layers, something, in this case, maybe more. Just because it's a lot more comfortable than crawling around on concrete. All right, so the next step is to put the fresh oil in. Now, a couple of things that you really don't want to do. We know all the oil is out of the bike. So I know roughly it's going to be over 3 quarts and less than 4 quarts. So what I'm going to try to do is put 3 quarts in and then check it, run it a little bit, check it, run, because I don't want to overfill it. Nothing good happens when you overfill these. I'd like it to be right in the middle, and since this bike doesn't burn any oil, now if the bike did burn oil, I'd go to the top of that, the 2 little marks. But when it's a good, reliable, and it doesn't burn oil, I like to be right in the middle. When you overfill a bike, one of the things that happens, the clutch drags. That's always one of the problems. And when you go to put it in gear, it's like clonk, and that can't be good. And all you're doing is filling up that little magnet in there with little metal chips. One more final run just to make sure I'm in the middle of that sight glass, and we'll be good to go. Now, to end this video with one true, embarrassingly funny story. In my wayward youth, I was looking at always trying to save money because I had old motorcycles and they needed a lot of maintenance, and well, it's a long story. But anyway, I decided one day I was going to put ordinary car oil, because it was about $1 a quart cheaper at the time, and I put it in this motorcycle, and I don't think it went 100 miles, and it had a slipping clutch, and the money I saved, not worth. I had to flush the oil out. Oh my God, then I was always worried it's going to slip again. And what you do, there's several choices you have when that happens. You can flush it with cheap oil 5 to 10 times. I've heard of other people that pull a clutch apart and sand the clutch plates and whatever. But there's a really easy way to avoid the whole thing. Put the oil that the bike manufacturer, if they say 1040, like on an R1, it specifically says 1040, not chemical oil. Use that oil. If a bike says chemical oil, use chemical oil. The oil is usually relating to the clearances in the motor. Modern cars have very tight clearances, so they need 5-weight oil and stuff. These old bikes don't have tight clearances, believe me. Believe me, they need the oil they recommend, 1040, and motorcycle oil. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this day. What can I say? It's ordinary maintenance. You don't do it, you pay later down the road. If you do it, you can take some satisfaction that, like me, you may have a GS or any motorcycle that you really enjoy riding, and it'll last a long time. Now, if you're as passionate as I am about keeping these older bikes alive, I've had this bike since it was brand new. It's a one owner, it's historically registered, it's got high mileage, it's been a great addition to my life. Actually, for more than half of my life, I've owned this bike. And I'm 79 years old, so if you're a young guy, you got the deck stacked in your favor. Anyway, just some simple information on doing an oil change. Hope you enjoyed sharing this day in the shop with me. Hope you picked up some good information, and I hope you'll share it with your friends who also share the passion for older motorcycles, and especially the Gs1100E. What a special part of motorcycling history that bike is, and I know a lot of my friends share that humble, very humble opinion. Now, if you're new to our channel, we have a very, very eclectic channel. One of the new features we have now is some of the videos are grouped into groups that you can access all the videos for one category in one mouse click. And it should be very convenient and very handy. Just check out the feature on the main screen playlist. And thanks to everybody for supporting the channel. We appreciate your support, and it makes this channel possible with all the things we do, the painting, the wheels, the polishing. And please take a second or two and hit the like button. And thanks everyone for watching.